Greetings. Greetings, everyone. Welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Be Strong Families webinar series, Staying Strong and Positive for Ourselves and Our Children. We're going to get started in just a minute, but as you come into the room, if you can open the chat, pick this item on the drop-down menu that says everyone and say hi. And where you're joining from, that would be fabulous. So I'm Katthe, and I'm joining from Wadsworth, Illinois. And I'm here with Samantha.
Hi, how's it going, everyone?
Joining from where?
I am in Oak Lawn, Illinois.
Awesome. And Michelle's coming from Western New York. Hi, Lynn from Colorado. And it's 12 o'clock, so we're going to get started, and Samantha is going to introduce.
So during the fall, Be Strong Families is going to be amplifying diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're going to be utilizing our A More Perfect Union Katthe deck as a tool. And what we're going to do is try what the Katthe deck really does is it mobilizes shared civic values of freedom, prosperity, safety, and justice. And this assists parents and families and children with having difficult conversations that are really, really important.
And so today's webinar is about getting children involved in social change. And Samantha and I are co-hosting.
All right, so the format of this webinar, we got two co-hosts here, Katthe and myself, and we're going to spend the first part of the webinar interactively giving you guys some background and context for each of the topics. And then we're going to discuss questions and prompts that are designed to find ways to bring unity and still affirm diversity. This webinar is going to be live streamed on our YouTube channel, and the recording will be available after the webinar is ended. There's a couple different ways to engage. So when you're ready to speak, please just raise your hand and we'll unmute you. And then you will need to unmute yourself to be heard. Feel free to type your comments into the group chat, but make sure that they're going to everyone. So there's a little screenshot there that shows you how to click everyone to everyone. And please just be patient with us. Remember, we're creating this safe space together. Be Strong Families ask that you type I agree in the chat to these agreements for our time together today. And so we ask that everybody speaks from their own experience, and you can use I statements to do that. We also always follow the golden rule. So treat other people the way that you want to be treated. Make sure that you're fully present, no multitasking. And if you need a minute, feel free to take a minute.
Yeah, I see we got some agreement. We need a little more agreement. We have a few more people in the room today. So how great. Hi, Adrian. Hi, Mariah. Hi, Judy. Hi, Tammy, Lynn. Wonderful. Hi, Hilda, Laura. Perfect. Okay, so let's get started. This is the context part. So we're going to start out with the youth involved in social movements. And this slide and the next one come from a 2012 pretty short paper called Youth and Social Movements, Key Lessons for Allies. And we're kind of thinking that all of us are allies to youth who want to get involved in social change. And you can look, it was sponsored by the Born This Way Foundation, the Berkman Center for Internet and Society at Harvard, and the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. So it's old, 2012, but we thought it had good information. And some of its points about youth being involved in social movements are on the left, that young people can be powerful agents of social change, that youth often innovate social movement media practices, because they're using what they do and what they know to be able to communicate with each other. And that youth speak truth to power in ways their peers can hear. So youth are powerful messengers for other youth, in addition to being influential to adults, but often youth are listening to youth more than adults are listening to youth. So, and that these youth movements frequently operate outside formal channels of political participation, which makes perfect sense, right? Because youth aren't voting, they can't vote. And their participation in kind of adult politics is limited. So they're using the channels that they use. So what we have a little quiz for you all about some inspiring youth to get us started. We're going to start with the young lady in glasses. I'm going to give you a hint. She's 15 years old, and she was involved in a while ago in the civil rights movement. Who knows who she is? You can write it in the chat if you recognize her.
Adrian wrote already that the youth pictured were all specifically taught how to see their power for social change and to advocate. And that's so very true.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, they were either taught or they figured it out themselves, you know. Ruby Lee's a good guess, but that's not who it is. Who is it, Samantha?
So this is Claudette Colvin, and Claudette was actually, before Rosa Parks, about 9 months, she refused to give up her seat on the same bus system. And there were actually a lot of women. So a lot of people know about Rosa Parks and the Montgomery, boycotts for the bus system in 1955. But a lot of people don't know there was actually a bunch of women before that who also refused to give up their seats. And the first was Claudette. She was just 15.
Really cool. So who's the person of the year? We can see her name there. Person of the year, Greta Thunberg. Who knows about Greta? What's Greta's issue? Climate change. Yes, Judy and Adrian. Exactly. Do you have anything to add about climate change and Greta?
Yeah, well, Greta's the one who was very, very, I would say, blunt when she spoke to the parliament, and she's a Swedish environmentalist. And what she said to everybody was pretty much, she scolded the politicians for not taking action on climate change.
Yeah, she's very powerful. You can Google all these people also. So, and then we've got on the right, Malala Yousafzai. And she's well known in Afghanistan for the Taliban. She was a victim of the Taliban and got shot in the head for demonstrating for girls' ability to go to school. And she continued agitating and being active in that after she was injured. It's been internationally known. So who is our Flint Lives person or Flint Lives person? Who knows who she is? Samantha, you want to talk about Mari?
So that is Mari, right? Did I pronounce it correctly? I think I got that's Mala, right?
Mari.
Mari. Okay, so Mari is the young future president, right, of Flint, Michigan, and what she's known for writing a letter to Barack Obama, when everything was going on in Flint, and she got him to come and visit, and actually that resulted in, I think, a couple $1 million worth of relief funds coming to the area. I know she's also since kind of been known as a philanthropist, and that she's already collected over $500,000 for Flint, Michigan.
Wow. And that was what was the issue? It was water, right?
The water, yes, absolutely.
In Flint.
Tragic.
You want to know who the top right, who are they?
So it's Emma Gonzalez.
Yes.
Oh,
lead poisoning in water. Yes, but who are the people on the top right? Who are they? I know some of you know. I don't want Samantha to give it away before you have a chance to weigh in.
Yeah, I can't.
Yes, Adrian says it was the Parkland shootings. Parkland shootings in Florida. Yeah, Gonzalez and David Hogue. Yep, Emma Gonzalez and David Hogue.
Yes, they are gun control activists, and I'm pretty sure we could all understand why, being survivors of the experience in Parkland.
And finally, we have the youth governor of Connecticut, right? What's Ella?
Yes.
What's
yes,
Ella?
Briggs.
Ella Briggs. I was going to say Briggs, but I was afraid I had it wrong. I don't want to get it wrong. Ella Briggs. So I don't know. We have a little 3-minute video to show Ella, and how inspiring she is, or they are, maybe.
Yes.
So we're going to YouTube now. And this is when she was running for governor.
As a proud member of the LGBTQ community, or lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender questioning, I'm looking forward to having your help to keep our schools safe and to spread the message that love is love. And together, we can make Connecticut a bit more colorful.
Talk is cheap, so our actions must speak louder than our words. Using many of my leadership qualities, I will work to bring awareness for all LGBTQ issues and opportunities and provide real results for the children of Connecticut. I am kind and accepting. I will be the voice for all students, no matter what race, religion, gender, or sexuality. I am determined. I will fight for what I believe in, no matter how many people say no, no matter how many times people will be mean to me. I will continue spreading the message of hope and acceptance. And I will remind our teachers and classmates what it's like to respect one another. And remember, love is love.
Unfortunately, there are always going to be people who will believe what we are doing is not right. They will do mean things or even worse. But the thing is, we can't change this. We were born this way. We live our truth. Now help me help others live theirs. Together, we will raise awareness for the need for more foster families to provide loving and safe spaces for Connecticut's LGBTQ youth that no longer have a safe and accepting home. We can help by making posters to inform LGBTQ youth and the families who would like to adopt them. My second idea is to have teachers trained in every school for students to talk to privately and comfortably with about bullying or any other issues. All students should feel safe, no matter what. My third idea is we can build support centers where every week members of the LGBTQ youth community and allies can come together and talk about what's important to them and just enjoy some bully-free time where we can all be ourselves. We know that this is going to cost a lot of money. My idea is to sell pride shirts and to do bake sales. Who doesn't love a rainbow cookie?
I can't do this alone, though. With your vote, you can become part of a team to keep our youth safe and happy. And isn't that all we want in this world? To feel loved, to feel kindness, to feel safe? With your vote, we will be able to keep all of us safe. Make a choice, make a change. And together, we can make a difference. Vote for Ella, and remember, love is love.
Okay. She's 11 years old. She's 11 years old.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, but and we want to also just expand. We're going to talk a little bit about other kids that aren't like the leaders. You don't have to be the leader of the pack to be able to be involved in social change. But I'm going to defer to Samantha for the next slide, which is still from Costanza Chalk's Youth and Social Movement Key Lessons for Allies.
Yeah, so we know that our children have a lot of challenges when it comes to being an advocate, and being an activist. And some of those challenges that the article points out are youth movements are mostly invisible. So hopefully here we go, it's come back up. But youth movements are mostly invisible. And what this really means is that we might see, for example, Ella, who has a LGBTQIA+ platform, speaking to her peers or on different youth platforms, but we're not going to see her on CNN very often. We're not going to see her represented in major adult movements. And so these groups are often invisible. They're more likely to be on social media, which is actually kind of a conflict because they're not all digital natives children, although that might be something that we usually assume because of their generation. And while they're definitely more advanced than us, there's a digital divide. And that digital divide can really affect children's access to technology, their training or ability to use it in creative ways. And that becomes a huge roadblock, especially when you have students who are activists for equity. Also, there's a war on youth. And I think we all know that. It's especially the teens. I know that they have it really hard when it comes to their platforms because they're often seen as adversaries. They're often seen as challenging the system because they're teens, which is something that normally happens a little bit during puberty and we all as parents see, but that's not always the case. Sometimes they're challenging something because they think that it's wrong and they feel that they have to voice that. And really some of the resolutions or solutions that the article offers, and I'll also say, I know there's a lot more challenges, which I'm going to ask everybody in just a moment. So let me give you a pre-warning so you can think about that one. What other challenges do you see? But the article kind of summarizing this, they talk about respect and recognition and representation and real talk. And, you know, I think it does speak for itself, but children need to, and youth need to be able to be respected for their viewpoints and opinions. They must be recognized when they have differing viewpoints and opinions than us or than systems that are in place. And they need to be able to have representation, and not just invisible representation, but major representation as a group of individuals. And real talk. We have to really have the real talk conversations with them and guide them through those things because they take specific skills, right, to be able to accomplish those real talk conversations.
Thank you, Samantha. And I also really like the, you know, just thinking about it from an ally's perspective, you know, that like Absolutely. The respect and recognition is not calling something that a youth wants unrealistic or or calling them unfocused, because if they aren't able to exactly phrase what they want to have changed, you know, it's kind of to respect and to see them. Everybody wants to be seen, just like Ella says, everybody wants to be loved, right? So, and the representation, what struck me as powerful about that when I was like thinking of myself as an ally is that we as adults can counteract negative messages about youth. You know, we can represent youth voice in places, you know, where they can't necessarily get in. And we can counteract stereotypes, which is helpful. And then
and we can learn too, right, Katthe? We can also learn from them if we're open-minded enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the real talk is just, you know, is just what we do here, you know, or what happens in cafes, or, you know, just being able to really hear perspectives that are different from our own. This goes to the learning part, like to be able to allow a safe space for being able to say what they're feeling and thinking and needing and seeing others need without necessarily challenging it or, you know, telling them, making them wrong or bringing them back to like how it was when I was a kid, you know, which I mean, at least I am. I've made all those mistakes, but I really, you know, resonated with, as an ally to youth who are wanting to make change, that these things are like really important. So.
And then we're going to move into our next slide now. So this slide is about environmental activism, and Katthe's going to take this one away for us.
Okay, so I really loved this. This is from a book, and you can't see the source, or at least I can't see the source on my screen. Oh yeah, it's Shannon Brescher-Shea, Growing Sustainable Together, Practical Resources for Raising Kind, Engaged, Resilient Children. And Andrew will put that link in the chat. It's 2020, so it's really recent. But I think what was really interesting to me about this is also, you know, it kind of brings it out of like the superstar, you know, kids who are creating like major, you know, movements, and brings it down to looking at activism as a kind of volunteerism. And that there's a huge range of activities that kids can be involved in that fall under activism and advocacy. And you can see some of them in the first paragraph written here. And Samantha, do you want to talk about some of, you know, Samantha both has children, but also has been a teacher for a number of years in high schools. Do you want to talk about some of the things that you encourage children to do in terms
Yeah,
of
definitely. And I think I was really inspired by reading this article and stuff, because I also felt like it connected with Greta Thunberg, or did I pronounce her last name correct? Greta, who, she really, if you read about her, she really started with having her parents start reducing their carbon footprint. So it was like little baby steps to get where she was. Next she organized her, just the people around her. She did something individual. She started protesting in Parliament. And then after that individual step, she had people and she formed like little groups. So it does start basic. You don't have to be the superstar to make change. And so for me as an educator, my first year teaching, I started partnering with organizations was one of the big things that I did. I partnered with an organization called ACE, and they came in and they taught our kids about carbon footprints and how much what they did impacted the environment, which they really had no clue about. So first it came with educating them, and then empowering them, giving them opportunities to speak their voice and to petitions and protests and volunteering. So really that's kind of a summary of a lot of and I have experience in different, avenues of activism for students and platforms. But I think that really is kind of how it all starts. It starts with kids hearing and learning about something that's, not fair or dangerous or inequitable, and then going from there to start to create change in little steps.
And what I liked about the framing of this activity as volunteerism and going to the youth.gov website and thinking about children are more likely to volunteer if their entire family is involved in the experience. And when children volunteer, they're happier. And there's evidence about this, that they're more likely to feel connected to their communities. They're more likely to do better in school. They're less likely to engage in risky behavior. And some of the benefits, she's specifically talking about environmental activism, but I think probably the benefits would accrue to other forms of activism as well. Because you can think about it like, what's happening? You're building relationships, and you're building relationships around common values. You're building relationships around something positive. So, and often children at any age, I don't know, when do they start getting mean? but like if you're a lot of peer pressure and social dynamics that are based on more superficial things can be real damaging to kids. And so the being able to get involved in something positive, middle school, get involved in something positive where you're making friends and building relationships across generations also, like it's multi-generational. So they're working with other kids, but they're also working with other parents, in some of these, environmental, in the background, there's cleaning up trash in a neighborhood or community gardening or, just any kind of movement for.
And Katthe, those were the opportunities that these children were given through, partnering with a program like the ACE program that came in and taught them things. Like those opportunities, like you said, the impact, you can see it on the culture of the school, the culture of the kids, interactions with each other. So it's evident.
And then through the relationships, they gain, I'm sure you saw this as well, Samantha, but they gain confidence and personal satisfaction, because that comes along with having a goal and then doing something about it, right? It's collaboration, the feeling of helping others and feeling empowered to be able to do something, and then finding hope. I think hope, is a very important value, and it's a very important, especially when children start becoming aware of what's going on in the world and their consciousness gets a little raised, it becomes stressful. So if they're learning about climate change and, the devastation that's happening, it can feel, all of us, children and adults, can feel powerless, or if you're learning about, racial inequities or wealth inequities, it can feel hopeless. It can feel powerless. It can feel like the odds are just stacked against you. So being able to find empowerment and hope and to help others and get confident and build relationships, all that stuff is part of activism.
Absolutely.
I interrupted you. I think did you want to say something, Samantha?
No, I'm saying, I'm agreeing with you 100%. I feel like, these benefits for kids, there's so many benefits for the kids that we could actually stay on this slide for some time, but
we're going to go to questions.
We're going to move on. Let's move on before we get
questions. Awesome. The first question, Andrew, is what youth advocates for social change have really impacted you? So in the chat or raising your hands, when you think of youth who have really, impacted you, impressed you, made you feel humble even, or amazed by what their power, who are some of those for you? And as you're thinking about it, Samantha's going to tell you a little bit about the what's in the background here. And Adrienne has her hand raised. So should we hear Adrienne first, Samantha?
Yeah, let's hear Adrienne first. I've been talking too long.
Hi, Adrienne.
Good morning, everybody. How are you?
Good.
I just wanted to say how important it is that we support our youth and the things that they do, because their messages may seem simple or direct to them, but they really do impact everybody. And it can be something really simple that your child gets involved with. A perfect example for me was when I was a young person way back then. I started going out on buses every weekend to plant trees with tree people. And it seemed like such a simple thing. I started off doing it through Girl Scouts, and I really enjoyed it. And the adults on the bus were really excited to have a child get dirty and plant all these trees on the weekend. And I really didn't think that it was going to impact me in any giant way. But, we see what's going on right now with climate change and Greta, and her concerns about the Paris Accords over the last 4 or 5 years. And it really is directly impacting us. And what's fascinating is that it hasn't really changed. I moved into a city that considers itself a tree city. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been having conversations with high-level individuals in our city about the diminishing trees at a startling rate. And I bring it up in all different kinds of meetings. One's an environmental group, one's about, flaring at our local trash site, all kinds of different places. And I get brushed off. But my favorite brush off is there's lots of trees. And finally, at a Dem Club meeting, I got the person who we elected as the environmental person there. And I said, so what about the trees? And he tried to shut me down. And somebody said, no, don't turn her microphone off. And it was really interesting because nobody had stood up for me thus far. Everybody usually just shuts the microphone off. But that's not really what was going on. Suddenly it became of big interest. And about a month and a half later, while watching a city council meeting, I noticed with that person on city council, I noticed that the arborist was listed to do a report on the city. And I live within the city of Los Angeles, so we're talking about a lot of area and a lot of trees. The city of Los Angeles had a vast diminishing amount of trees in their surrounding city of our city, and so did some of the other cities. But the report was most astounding, and our city had 10% less trees than all the surrounding cities. So everybody's trees had diminished, but ours had diminished the most. And it was something that I have been talking about as we talk about making sure there's enough housing for our citizens. We'd be cutting down our trees, making sure that our trees were free for people. Doesn't mean anything if they're still sitting in the lot and nobody knows that the trees are available to you. So
thank you.
I just wanted to say that, it takes a long time sometimes for these things to have an impact, but they still count.
Yep. Thank you so much, Adrienne. Thank you for sharing your personal experience. And that's the next question too. So other people can be thinking also about what you did as a youth and how that impacted you. And I'm going to ask Samantha also just to tell us, because it's a great story in the background about these youth, these hope dealers. So
we picked this background image because I have a personal connection to it. So my first year teaching, I went from being student teaching in one of the most affluent white neighborhoods in Chicago to teaching in one of the most the highly low income minority schools. I met this young man in the bottom left of the picture. I don't know if it's your left, but it's mine. His name is Corey. He's wearing the red tie. Corey was working really hard to write a scholarship, and he and I connected, and he was writing all of these amazing things he had done. And he told me the story about how his father was a drug addict who sold dope. And a lot of the people in his community and other students wanted him to join in this gang. His father was a gang member and was, sort of gang royalty, and wanted him to join this gang and sell drugs. And Corey said, "No, I'm not a dope dealer, Miss Peterson." He said, "I'm a hope dealer." And he has started this 501c3. So he takes, now he's a Morehouse graduate. He graduated as senior class president from Morehouse, just amazing young man. Has gone to every school or educational institute I've ever worked for or with to speak to students, to motivate them. And he organized a spring break to take students who are disadvantaged on an HBCU, historical Black college tour. And he does that annually, and just so many other things for children. It's amazing. So he's my inspiration. I met him my first year teaching, and I can't even tell you how amazing it feels I celebrated his 30th birthday with him recently. And so just great stuff.
That's awesome. And Natalia says BLM movement led by youth in our city of Lompoc, California. So that's, who else knows people who's seen youth on the local level? Who impacted you? Okay, well, let's move to the next question then.
Yeah, so how are you involved in changing the world when you were a child? Katthe already kind of forewarned us on this one. So please type it in the chat. Say, we also got Adrian answered Zach Feldman.
Who's Zach Feldman? Sandra has her hand raised. Let's talk to Adrian. You can write who Zach Feldman is in the chat. And Sandra, welcome, Sandra. How are you involved in changing the world when you were a child?
I'm sorry, it was going for the other question, but
I tried to answer the other question.
That's okay. Y'all went on.
No, you can answer the other question. Answer the other question. It's fine.
Well, I guess it's both of them. Well, I was just going to say, well, Katthe, I'm very involved in gang intervention. That used to be part of my life in the 80s. So now I'm into doing with teens, working to make that change. Been doing that for about 10 years or more in the community, doing teen groups, working with our youth on my own, with other intervention, gang intervention groups, people who've been in there, which has really been going strong. COVID hit where we couldn't really meet, but that's something we give back. People who've been in that life, we dedicated our lives to give back, to help families. And I work with the parents to help them to work with their kids that's dealing with gangs or failing schools and different things, to not be a part of that culture. So awesome. That's something I dedicate my life.
Thank you so much, Sandra. We got some more in the chat too. Betty says going on protests for immigrants. Dana says taking back the schools, gun violence changes activities led but locally by high school students. Adrian says Zach Feldman amplified the gun control issue for Parkland while giving voice to the LGBTQIA plus community. He released the doves at his high school. And Tammy says, Tammy's going on to this question and says, when I was a child, I participated in many walkathons and drives for various charities through the Catholic school I attended. Well, I remember also like collecting for UNICEF and things like that. When my daughter was in elementary and middle school, she and her friends started a Kids Helping Kids Club. They would sell bracelets that they made, and we do other fundraisers such as running a booth or table at community bazaars, selling baked goods and candies. And then each year they would take the money they earned and buy Christmas gifts to anonymously drop off for the kids at the local domestic violence shelter. They kept this up for 5 years. I was proud of them for taking the initiative and for keeping it going for so long. Nice. And Lynn says she tutored elementary children who were struggling in reading. I did that too. it's like I'm remembering all of this stuff. Like I was like, well, I didn't go. My parents weren't protesters. They weren't, they were, and I didn't go on like some of the. I mean, my mother. It's weird because I was born and raised in the '60s and early '70s, and there certainly was a lot going on then. My parents weren't involved, and I wasn't involved in that. But all these things about tutoring children and raising money for all those things we did. And I remember the first Earth Day. And it's been going for 50 years this year, in 2020, 2 years ago. But
yeah. I actually started tutoring kids at 17. So that was actually where I kind of got my start. And that led to writing letters to politicians, writing grants, and then actually opening some schools and doing some amazing work I worked with homeless youth. So very exciting, to
awesome.
hear that.
Let's go to the next question, Andrew. So this is what's your experience with getting children and youth involved in social activism? The picture in the background is the 2018 Women's March, and you can't really see her sign, but it says little girls with dreams become women with vision. And I'm thinking that she's there with her mother. And I know, so I just wondered if anybody has stories about your own children or as an educator, getting children and youth involved in social activism. So the one hand, the last one we heard about was witnessing children that are involved with social change and being inspired by them. But what's your experience with actually getting children involved and youth involved in social activism? In the chat, feel free to write your answers in the chat or raise your hand. Adrian says scout leadership.
Yeah, from Adrian.
So Samantha, do you want to?
Yeah, so, for me, I'm going to answer this from a parent's perspective. I kind of already talked a little bit from an educator's perspective. And I've done some of those things, but I think as a parent, I have, a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I really find this a very challenging question because getting them involved in cleaning their room can be challenging. I think it's about sparking a passion for them. Letting them know that they can be curious and teaching them some curiosity, but also about having conversations where they learn the skills to be successful. And that's sort of what this Ampu deck that we're using is, and we're talking about these conversations that Be Strong has is all about. We have to teach them to have patience, to have self-control. Kids have to know when to be courageous in a conversation and when to respect differences. And that takes experience. So for me, I really try to get my children involved in things by talking to them first and then encouraging them to explore and then supporting them in what they, anything that they want to do. And so for my daughter, it was all about recycling. And then the next thing that she was about making sure, and she, also is still very much, that's one of her platforms, but also about animal rights. And, I think that's one thing we kind of didn't get to see anybody in animal rights, but there's a lot of activists out there. And so just encouraging her to do things like shelter, which was tough for me, or foster animals, but ended up being an amazing experience, or volunteer, getting them involved in volunteering. And I'll say that there's a really great organization, I think it's called Share Your Souls, out of Chicago, where you can go sort shoes. And so my son's done that every year. And those shoes go off to other countries to people who really need them. So, and they're all donated. So great things.
Fantastic. Natalia says, my experience was to listen to my youth and children and support their participation in protests and teach them the importance of respectfully disagreeing, but standing up for injustice. I'm just thinking, like when we talk about chesed, like activities where I was more about like volunteering in a soup kitchen or bringing my son to I was very involved with the Jewish community, and there's specific times of year where you're bringing, and this is kind of like Thanksgiving or Christmas, but where for Passover, we brought boxes to people who didn't have the ability to make Passover. And so getting him involved in that, in delivering those baskets, and in, thinking about assisting people in the community who were struggling. that's more. And then my ex-husband was a big, protester, marcher. So he would always invite my son to go with him to march, but Megastab wasn't always really very interested in that. I think that's like respecting. He would rather do the volunteering thing and not do the protesting thing. The energy of all those people in one place and the passion, it made him anxious, so I think it's also important, like what you said, Samantha, about knowing who your children are and knowing what they care about and knowing how they can participate and in making things happen that they care about, as opposed to having it be one way. Tammy, let's see, Lynn says, my experience has been to remind children, including my own, that their volunteering to help others has an immeasurable positive impact on others.
Key.
Who remembers going to a nursing home and entertaining? I remember going singing, like playing guitar and singing and my grandmother, oh my gosh, my grandmother was a board member of the Getman Home, which was in the Adirondacks. And when we were kids, whenever we came to visit for the summer, she would make us, make us come with her to visit the people at the Getman Home. And we didn't, it was a really teaching opportunity, because we would say, like, we don't want to, we want to play, we want to swim. And she would be, no, you're coming. It's very important. And we said, why is it important? And she said, because you smiling at people, you being there with them, you visiting them is going to give them a pleasure. And that's positive. That's very positive. So Adrian says, I always ask youth where their interest and passion lie, animals, people, or earth. And Tammy says, oh yes, I remember doing that too. And my kids both did that too. And Tammy answered the last question and said she started in 6th grade volunteering in kindergarten classrooms in the public schools in her district, because her private school ran on a different schedule. And she enjoyed the time and was challenged to work with children who didn't speak English yet. So awesome. I think it's just lots of good ideas and positive memories. Anything else? We move on to the next question.
Right. So this one, where are your family's values and practices related to activism? What are your family's values and practices related to activism? So we know the schools are very involved and that's important, but it starts at home. And so there's just a lot of values that we have to have and practices in order to engage and kind of activate that activism in our students and our children. So what do you guys think? Drop it in the chat.
Yeah, I think this is a sign that people had on their lawns a lot in Evanston when I lived in Evanston. And in this house, we believe Black Lives Matter, women's rights are human rights, no human is illegal, science is real, love is love, and kindness is everything. And I think that there are other similar signs about family values and how we live those values, not how we talk about them and how we support other people, but also how we live these values. What does it mean? Yeah, this is Adrian says this is a very religiously motivated question. Tikkun olam and do unto others, etc. Tikkun olam is changing the world. That's a Jewish, and do unto others also in biblical, as you would have them do unto you, the golden rule. Betty says hers are culture, tradition, equity, kindness, honesty, respect.
That's great.
But I think values, just values motivated behavior. And this is what I was kind of talking about in the last week, about how I think sometimes showing up as kind and respectful and honest, and if people were, from a spiritual perspective, treating people the way they wanted to be treated, a lot of the partisanship would disappear. A lot of the anger, the acrimony would disappear. Because if everybody treated everybody else with kindness and honesty and respect, that would be a different world, right? If we weren't going up against each other and like fighting to the death on things.
Yeah, that definitely happens. And for me, I think, Katthe, one of the things for my family is I like to encourage the value of like hard work and understanding that you're responsible for creating change and passion. So it takes it like a notch higher, but I try to instill in them like a sense of responsibility and civic responsibility. So, you know, they understand that they are privileged, even though, you know, they don't obviously see it always. It's always you know, they're very blessed and lucky, and they, to some extent, owe when they see something inequitable, they owe to do what they can. And so I think that's one of the values that helps them for my family. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it was a short, I mean, in some ways, you know, when I was raising Mengesab, we were observant Jews. Our household was observant Jewish, and it was a kind of a shorthand because there's a whole lot of activities and actions and beliefs and thoughts and texts that support social change, social activism, and being involved in the community and civic responsibility. And just there's the word for charity in Hebrew, it's tzedakah, which means righteousness or justice. So the whole concept is not that I'm giving like out of the goodness of my heart, but that actually that it's our responsibility as human beings is to even the playing field, that it's justice to give so that others, to raise others up. So just interesting little concept. I'm sure I'm seeing in the chat a lot of people who said that it comes from religion and spirituality. Adrian, religiously motivated question can be for people. And sometimes people get to it without religion too. I think Sandra might want to say something about that. But let's go to the next slide, next question, because we're 15 minutes. We have a lot of questions. This is our last, oh no, this is our second to last question. So the question is, what community-based or national social justice or advocacy groups have made a positive difference for you, your family, or your people? So that's a mouthful, but in the background, these are murals, Black Lives Matter murals that are in San Francisco. I think just I picked this image because I think art is also activism. I mean, so that it's another form of activism that we haven't talked about, like animal rights, but that art and creating murals, creating art, artists have always been both mystics and activists. So another way to get children involved in activism. And
yeah,
Lynn says, what other groups? National social justice or advocacy groups, positive difference. Dana says Poor People's Campaign and Immigration Justice. Nice. Adrian says, I'm working to get a public bank started in Los Angeles. It's mandated for equity. Nice.
And did we read Lynn's there? She said the NAACP.
Yeah, I said NAACP, but that's the first one.
Yeah.
Equity and justice, yes. ACLU. To me, the ACLU, my former brother-in-law has been active in he was a lawyer for the ACLU for his whole career. And a lot of the works that they did was with kids in child welfare. He did specifically. But I really got a much greater appreciation for the ACLU a few years ago. It just seems like we need, even if I don't agree with everything that they do, we need to have passionate advocates for civil liberties, you know, and I appreciate them. Southern Poverty Law Center, also, I've always, it's another one of my favorites. NAMI, Tammy says, and keeping people from becoming homeless in California, Adrian says. Tammy says, trying to promote mental well-being and remove the stigma around mental illness. And Dana says, an allied group, American Friends. Samantha, share your strength, share our strength. Yep. Awesome. Okay, let's go to the last question we have here from the deck. What have your personal experiences taught you about justice in America, and how have you shared this with your children? EDL, that's the Anti-Defamation League. What have your personal experiences taught you about justice in America, and how have you shared this with your children?
So we have one raised hand.
Oh, good. Whose hand is raised? Let's.
So we have Adrienne.
Oh, Adrienne. Cool.
It's me, because I'm the only person who speaks today. I don't know. I have adult children, so they're newly adult, and they've grown up in this time of turmoil and had a lot to think about. We're not mainstream religion, so that is an issue, and we look white, but we're not in our minds. We're sort of part of the people of color, but we look white. So there's a lot of privilege in that, and there's also a lot of mistaken identity, because culturally people walk around and think, oh, you're a Christian, and you might not be, and or maybe you're part Christian. So I really taught my children to stand up and stick their hand on the shoulder of the downtrodden person or the person who's targeted in any situation, because you really don't know what's going on in the greater picture, but you do know that people make a lot of mistakes and they need somebody to stand behind them so that they can speak up. A lot of times you really don't want your personal information out there in such a personal, big way. Like, hey, I'm Jewish, I don't walk around with a big giant gold star or yellow star on my shirt like they did in the Holocaust times, right? In the World War II, where they made all the Jews identify visually. And that's abhorrent. It's wrong. So it must be very difficult for people who have more pigment in their skin, and people are being mean to them because they happen to be that way. And so I've always told my children, you want to stand up with these people, you want to walk over to them and ask them if they're all right, be respectful, basically start a conversation and walk them away from whatever's going on. And they've always done that. They don't really understand it when I tell them what's going on, but they do it in real life, because believe me, it happens in high school and it happens in college. It happens out there on the street when you don't expect it. You're at the park, doing something, and something else happens and you just happen to be at that moment. And it's important to understand when to walk away and when to have the argument. So I've always been a very strong supporter of other people, but at the same time, you can support somebody and uplift them without engaging in something that's going to get everybody hurt, right? So you can walk them away and still uplift them, and you can still support them, and you can go to the police together, because together you're stronger. So that's the way that we work, and what I've taught my children, and it seems to be working for them. They're both very strong advocates of their people and the kinds of things that they want to do, and that's how they live their life.
Thank you so much for sharing and being brave and raising your hand and coming on to talk. Betty says the system is broken. Tammy says there's still a lot of work to be done and we each need to do our part. Lynn says justice exists, but it's not present everywhere, nor does everyone believe that all deserve to be treated with justice, dignity, respect, and fairly. And ditto on there's more work to be done. And Dana says justice isn't necessarily an accompaniment to freedom. We have to keep reminding our children and grandchildren that we need to stand up and watch for movements that might impact justice for all. Everyone deserves justice. It's a hard question.
Yeah, I think when I was looking at the question, the first thing I thought about was just that disconnect sometimes between justice and the law.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing that it's hard to teach your children about, when they're ready to know that and how you're ready to deliver that message to them, but without kind of like sheltering them so much that you don't give them the opportunity to learn about the issues that are out there and the disconnects.
And Adrian says, justice is a construct. Everyone deserves to be heard and to be treated with dignity and respect. Well, I want to thank you all for being here today and sharing this hour with us. And thanks, Samantha, for co-hosting with me, and Andrew for doing all the background tech stuff and helping to format this PowerPoint. So let's go to the next slide, Andrew, and just think about in the chat. We did this at the beginning of these webinars, is ask people to put their hashtag Amplify in the chat. What do you want to amplify coming out of today's conversation? We have hashtag Amplify youth activism. What else do you want to amplify? Amplify grassroots activism, Andrew says. How about everybody, other people? What do you want to amplify coming out of this? Model social justice. Hashtag Amplify model social justice. What else? What are we amplifying coming out of today? Hashtag Amplify all can make a difference. Hashtag Amplify talk to your children. Hashtag Amplify equality. Hashtag Amplify build into the educational system. Amplify respect for all cultures. Yes. Wonderful. Amplify valuing our youth activists. Yes. Listen to our kids. Awesome. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Andrew. Tomorrow we have Spanish, and Sarah Gonzalez will be hosting. And then Friday, we have a Taste of a More Perfect Union Cafe. That's 1.5 hours, and it's at noon and free. Invite anybody that you think would benefit from experiencing a cafe, and the questions are going to come from our More Perfect Union deck. Again, you can subscribe to our Be Strong Families on YouTube. Please do. And let's go to the next slide. Andrew's put the poll up, so before you leave, if you fill out the poll. And if you want to continue these kinds of conversations, pick up or go online and get a More Perfect Union Parent Cafe in a box. You can use the QR code or just go to our website. And thank you for being here. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.